Hi there, this is Anna from Anna Aspnes Designs, and I'm back this week with a new video tutorial. This time I want to provide some guidance for using the ArtsyKardz that have made a reappearance in the Anna Aspnes Design store at Scrapbooking. If you go to the store, then you will notice that we do have a category called ArtsyKardz, and it's full of packages of these different cards that are delivered in 3x4, 6x6, and 6x4 format. And these were originally designed for use with the project life or my own personal photo-inspired project. I have an artsy approach to documenting the everyday that I call the photo inspired, and I have a series of products that support that, including templates and of course these cards. A couple of years ago I made the decision that I wanted to stop making these for a while, but just recently I've had a lot of requests asking how to use these cards, and I've also had an inkling to play with them and reincorporate them into my weekly pages. So last week I created a set, a multi-pack of ArtsyKardz using the ArtPlay palette Sashay collection. And these ArtsyKardz are designed to coordinate with the ArtPlay palette so that you can mix and match the different products in your layout designs. So before I go ahead and show you some of the ways that you can use these cards, I first of all want to show you what you will get when you download one of these ArtsyKardz packs. When I first started with the ArtsyKardz series, I essentially sold them in smaller sets. So you could purchase them by 3x4, 4x6, and then I got requests for 6x6. And then that advanced into these multi-packs in which you get a selection of all the different sizes. So you'll download 2 to 3 zips. And what I've done with the new ones is I have divided them by size. So the larger ones will be in the first folder, and these are the 6x6, and you'll get 2 different cards in 6x6 format, and these are based on the designs of the Artsy papers. Now the difference between these cards and some of the other cards that you may have come across in regards to project life is that I deliver these cards in JPEG format as well as PSD format. So what that means is that when I drag this file into my Photoshop or Photoshop Elements workspace, then you can see that we have all of these different layers that are in the layers panel. And this is really cool because it means that we can go in and we can turn off the visibility of any of these layers as we choose. We can go in and we can rotate any of these layers if we want to. So for example, if I wanted to rotate this text, I could just select that text and rotate it. Using the transform controls, I can resize that text, and I can also move it around. So this gives me lots of flexibility in order to be able to make the design work for me. Again, we've got a small transfer here that I could reposition if I wanted to do that. You can change the color of some of these layers simply by going up to Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. And if you're working in Photoshop Elements, that would be Enhance, Adjust Color, Hue and Saturation. And then you can go in and you can change the color of the hue. If you were to change this option, this master option here, then you can select the color to which you want to apply the color change or the hue shift. So lots of ways that you can manipulate and modify these cards when you have access to the individual layers. And of course, adding in then the power of other Photoshop tools such as opacity shifts, color adjustments, and blending modes, then you can get really creative and create some really cool art pieces and cards for both your scrapbooking layouts, for project life, for photo inspired, and then other crafting projects. If you are a card maker too, these make a great foundation for making thank you cards or birthday cards as you prefer. So let's go ahead and close this out, and I want to show you some of the other cards before we then move on to showing you how I use them. So here are the 4x6, and I've created a variety of 4x6, 6x4. Again, they are delivered in JPEG and PSD format, and you can of course rotate these in your workspace. So again, we drag in one of these cards into our Photoshop workspace, and you can go to image rotation and rotate 90 degrees clockwise. And now all of a sudden, if I go ahead and zoom out, you can see that we have a portrait card instead of a landscape style design. And so there are 4 different variations of the 4x6, and then of course we go into the final folder, which are the 3x4s, and I've also provided 4 of those as well. So you can see all the different designs here. So let's move into the part where I show you how to use these. I've actually prepared a folder with examples so that I can show you. So here is a recent photo inspired page that I created, and you can see how I've added some artsy effects to some of my photos by incorporating my images with these ArtsyKardz designs. So let's go back to our examples, and I first of all want to show you how you can use the JPEG versions of the cards, aside from either just using them as is or printing them out for your designs. You can also go ahead and drag that card into your workspace. So now we have 2 cards. And I am going to go ahead and incorporate this card with one of my photos. So I have this picture here. You can see that we have this photo of my dogs in my living room, and I've combined that photo with this ArtsyKardz that I have just imported into my Photoshop workspace. So let's go ahead and grab that original photo and then move it into our workspace. So we essentially have our photo, and then we have our ArtsyKardz. And I'm working with a landscape style photo, so I need to make sure that I have a landscape style card. So let's go to image rotation, and then I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees clockwise so that we have the same orientation. And then with the move tool selected from the tools panel, I'm going to click down on the photo, hold down that left mouse button, drag, and then release that left mouse button. And you can see if I zoom out that the photo is much larger than the underlying card. So with that move tool selected and your transform control selected, I'm going to click on the corner. You can see I have that diagonal double-ended arrow, and then I'm going to drag this in. Careful not to rotate it. And you want to bring that in so that the photo fits over the card, and I'm going to leave it just like that. You can go ahead and minimize that photo, and then it's simply a matter of selecting different blending modes. So notice as I select each of the blending modes, then the effect will change. And this is all dependent on how the photo interacts with the underlying card based on Photoshop algorithms. So some of them are going to yield better results than others. I often find that the darken blending modes, these are in the second section of your blending mode options, tend to work the best. And I usually go with either multiply or linear burn. Once you have applied your blending mode, you can then perfect the effect of the blending mode by going to Image Adjustments and Levels in Adobe Photoshop Elements. That's Enhance, Adjust Lighting Levels, and you can increase the highlights, You can make the shadows much darker, and you can also change the midtones. So notice how that affects how the underlying card is showing through the image. And then when you have it how you want it, you can click OK. You can also go ahead and duplicate these layers so that you have multiple layers, and then you can change the opacity of the layers individually and also apply different blending modes. So I could go ahead and apply a darker blending mode. So we have our first layer with a multiply blending mode at 48%, and then a secondary layer with darker color added, and that's at 100%. So we can also change that too. Notice when we bring that opacity down, we are able to change the effect. In the same way that we're able to layer and apply blending modes to photos over the ArtsyKard, we can reverse this process. So let's go ahead and just remove one of these photo layers. I'm going to bring the blending mode back to normal and the opacity back up to 100% so that we have the original photo with just our levels photo edits. And now I'm going to go ahead and just double click on that background layer to unlock that layer, and I'm going to drag that layer up to the top. So now, instead of applying the blending mode to the photo layer, we're going to apply it to the card layer. And again, we go through the same process, and it might yield a slightly different result. I actually think I prefer this approach. I really like the darkened one. So you can go ahead and select it, and then again, you can go ahead and you can duplicate this layer, apply different blending modes, maybe change the opacity. The other thing you can do as well is you can select that card, go to image adjustment levels, and you can make that card darker or lighter by adjusting these levels levers, and then go ahead and click OK. Once you have completed blending your photo into your ArtsyKard, then you're going to want to go ahead and save it. And I would suggest that you save your card projects in the same way that you save all of your other digital artistry and scrapbooking layouts. So I would save the PSD file. This allows you to go back to the file at any time and make any changes. And then you are also going to want to save your image as a JPEG file. So to do this, you're going to go to File, Save As. You are going to rename this as whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to call it Dogs and click Save. Click OK, and now I'm going to go back and go to Save As, and this time I'm going to select the JPEG option from the drop-down menu, and then I'm going to go ahead and save this as a dog file. Now if I go back to my examples, I should be able to locate the two files. So we have our dogs JPEG, and then we have our PSD file. And then when you're ready to incorporate this edited or modified ArtsyKard into your work, you can drag the JPEG into your workspace, and then you can simply clip this image to a mask or a frame, or you can custom mask it into your designs and use it just like any other digital art element in your digital scrapbooking and artistry. You can, of course, also print this image and use it in your paper projects. Now that we've looked at the JPEG versions of the ArtsyKardz, I want to turn your attention to using the layered PSD files. And you can see on my screen I have a 3x4 ArtsyKard from the Sashay collection. And within the layers of this card, you can see that I've introduced a black and white photo, which I have duplicated and clipped to a mask. And originally, this mask was like this. So if I go ahead and turn this off, you can see the difference. So in order to make that layer more impactful, I essentially duplicated this layer, and then I went to Layer, Merge Down. And what this does is it provides a better mask to which I can clip the photo. So had I just clipped that photo to the single layer, for example, let's go ahead and bring this photo down and go ahead and go to Layer, Create Clipping Mask. You can see that that is not nearly as visually interesting as the alternative, which looks like that. And then you can see the impact of duplicating that photo layer by dragging that photo layer down to the new layer icon in Photoshop, or up to the new layer icon if you're working in Photoshop Elements, and applying the color blending modes. So again, you can go through and you can experiment with the different blending modes that you have available to you. I really liked the way the color burn intensified the colors and then also created a great image. And of course, once I have finished manipulating my card by turning off some of the layers perhaps, or moving around some of the artistry, I could have had this up here. I could have gone ahead and rotated it like this, for example. So there's lots of different ways that you can manipulate these different cards when they are delivered in PSD formats. You can go ahead and you can save that card and then use it in your digital artistry, scrapbooking, or crafting projects. So I'm going to go ahead and close this one down, and I'm now going to go back to our ArtsyKardz. In this case, I want to reproduce this particular card here. So I'm going to open up the card that I decided to use into my workspace, and then I am going to select a photo. So I'm going to go to the Photos folder here, and I'm going to bring in this image. And then I usually like to bring in the photo at the top of the layers stack. So I will select the last layer in the layers panel, and then with the move tool selected, click, drag, and then release that photo onto the card. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out by going to View, Zoom Out, and then just resize that card so that it fits onto my canvas. You don't have to have the entire photo on the canvas, but you certainly need to have your subject matter visible. And when you have it how you want it, you can click on the check mark to accept that transformation and then close out the original. And then from here, we are going to start blending that photo with the layers in the layered ArtsyKardz. And I like to sort of bring this photo down the layers to see what kind of effect I can achieve by changing the placement of that photo between the layers. I also like to experiment with clipping photos to different layers. So we have a transfer here, for example. I can then go ahead, if I want to, and duplicate that layer and perhaps bring that down and clip this photo to multiple layers if I wanted to. So I can go to Layer, Create Clipping Mask. Or I could simply just bring that photo down to the bottom here and maybe start playing around with the blending modes. And multiply is always a favorite of mine, so I tend to pick that one first. And then usually I will go up to image adjustment levels or curves if you're working in Photoshop. If you're working in Photoshop Elements, that's enhance, adjust lighting levels, and you only have the option of levels to you. So let's go ahead and do that, and I can lighten that photo and just make it a little bit more intense. And then I can start playing around with all of the layers. So I like to turn off the visibility of the layers to see which ones are impacting my image. So this gold one, for example, we could perhaps resize and reposition that one. And then let's go ahead and just go through. So there's a nice paper texture there, which we can perhaps rotate and then move this and align it with the wall that's behind where my family and I are sitting. This is the one that's showing this leaf motif through the cards. So we can maybe go ahead and rotate this card. We could perhaps duplicate this card, maybe rotate it in different spaces. We could also, if we wanted to, apply a blending mode to that. So you can see how the different blending modes are going to impact it. Quite like the lightened blending modes. This one's quite fun with the soft light. So let's go ahead and use that one. I like how this goes over the cheetah in the background here. We have this script. Maybe we'll bring that up to the top. And you can go ahead and you can change the size of that. You can change the positioning of it. You can select the eraser tool and grab a brush. This is just a brush from one of the ArtPlay palettes that I have loaded in my panel and works quite well as a blending brush. So I can just go ahead and mask the edges. And then you can see this stain here is sort of hindering the facial features of my husband and I. So I can select that layer and I can resize it. I can go ahead and I can rotate it. I can move it off the edge. I can blend the edges with the eraser tool or with a mask and a blending mode. There's also a blue stain in the background here, so it might be advantageous here to move that out the way as well. So this isn't exactly the same rendition as I used previously, but it's close, and you can see how every time it can be slightly different. Maybe you want to move this up slightly so it's not in my son's face, and then maybe reduce the opacity of this texture layer like this. Maybe go to multiply and perhaps try some different blending modes. It could be that we go with multiply and then we reduce the opacity, and then we perhaps try a duplicate copy of that and then apply a different blending mode. So now you're starting to see how flexible and how much fun you can really have with these layered cards. Before we go ahead and close this down, I'm going to bring in the original and just see how it differed. So here is the one that I actually went with. And so you can see that I didn't apply a blending mode, and I had the opposing positioning of those two transfers. I also had the stain on this side. It was a great way to add some visual interest to this black area here. And you can see that I placed the text in a different orientation. So very similar, but two different ways to use the same ArtsyKardz. Go ahead and close this down, and let's just take a look at the final example that I had to show you. And I did something just slightly different with this card in that I clipped the photo to a FotoBlendz clipping mask. So if I go ahead and turn off this layer here and I zoom out, you can see that if I resize this mask, I didn't resize it at all, I just brought it into my workspace, but I introduced this mask, and then in order to make it work for my photo, I took a blending brush. So let's go ahead and grab this one here, and I will write down the ArtPlay palette that this brush is included in and include it in the video notes. But you can select that paintbrush, and I'm going to select white as the color, and then you can go in and you can simply just paint over that mask to bring back any detail that you're missing. So it's just a really fun way to incorporate your photos into cards as well by using the FotoBlendz clipping masks that are available in the Anna Aspnes Designs store. You'll also notice that I have applied a multiply blending mode to the mask layer. So if I go ahead and take that back to normal, you can see how the blending mode applied to the mask affects the photo that is clipped to it. And if I take that back to normal and turn off the visibility of the layer, you can see where I have painted this area in white directly on top of that FotoBlendz clipping mask. So I'm going to go ahead and take that back to normal. And then of course you can add this to any of the templates or layouts that you are working with. And if I go ahead and access my layout from this week, which was one of my photo inspired pages, you can see that I was able to clip this image to one of the mask layers in the photo inspired template. So hopefully this has given you some really good ideas on how you can incorporate the ArtsyKardz into your own digital scrapbooking or artistry or crafting projects. I will be back again in a couple of weeks with some more ideas on using ArtsyKardz. But in the meantime, have fun. If you have any questions, please email me or leave a comment below. I very much appreciate feedback and requests for videos. It really helps to guide me in providing education that is useful and interesting to you. Have a great week, and I will be back in this space again very soon. Take care.